welcome everybody this evening for the fourth channel of our regular Careers Life in Yale virtual programming. This is an endeavor that is led by the Careers Life in Yale Committee of the YAA Board of Governors. It's by alumni, with alumni, and for alumni. And this channel, we are calling this year the Omnibus channel. And I, Stephanie Grilly, am one of the organizers. And my partner in crime this season is Simon Ingold, who is a total trooper because Simon is in Zurich, Switzerland, not Zurich, Idaho, or some such. So Simon is it's 2 o'clock where Simon is tonight.
AM.
Yes, AM. The Omnibus channel is kind of a catch-all. It's multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, in which we spotlight tonight a Yale alumni who in this instance happens to be both a Yale College alum and Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. And that is, of course, Carmen Bambach, who is the Marcia F. and Jan T. Vilcek Curator of the Department of Drawings and Prints at the Metropolitan Museum in New York City. I will share with you that I am also art history PhD, and I will assure you they don't get any more top-notch in terms of their scholarship and accomplishment that Carmen has gotten with respect to her research on Michelangelo and Leonardo. Either one of her blockbuster exhibition at the Met a few years ago, which I hope some of you got to see, or her 4-volume study of Leonardo published by Yale University Press. Either one of those would have put her to the top tier of art historians, but somehow this woman has managed to produce both, which have been received with both critical and popular applause. So with this channel that indeed is about including all the disciplines, it's only appropriate perhaps tonight that we have somebody who can start and kick off our series talking about 2 individuals who were giants of the Renaissance before the very idea of disciplines even put us into our separate silos. So let's get this party started. And I'd like to hand it over to Carmen. And Carmen, of course, you have some wonderful slides to share with us.
Thank you.
And as we get started, could you just maybe tell us a little bit, just a little profile about how a young girl who came from Chile when she was 14 years old ended up just a few years later at Yale, when she arrived in this country, had hardly any English-speaking skills. And by the time you were a senior at Yale, you made a discovery that nearly has revolutionized how we look at drawings and the relationship of drawings in the Renaissance.
Steph, you are so kind. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us. It's really so great to be here. I wanted first to say that about Michelangelo and Leonardo, just imagine the biggest enemies being either of these artists. So just think of almost World War III. Michelangelo and Leonardo had a showdown in 1503, 1504. They couldn't have been more different as artists. They couldn't have been more different as personalities. Leonardo was really sociable. Michelangelo was an absolutely negative person, solitary, melancholic, and very irascible. So I feel like the mama who has to make peace with these two artists. And my method as an art historian is to be really interested in the artist as the person. So even in my shows, it's not just about their work, but the artists the personalities that stand behind them. Well, my family and I left Chile after the coup d'etat on the 11th of September of 1973. That was a very weird thing to have had 9/11 on the same day. It was very traumatic for my family. We were not political refugees, but had we stayed, because of the military regime, we would have, certainly I am too much of a loudmouth, and I probably would be about 6 feet under. And so, yeah, I mean, I have always been interested in the visual arts. I had wanted to be an artist, and I also studied architecture at undergraduate. But when I found this drawing by Michelangelo during my senior year, I think the bug bit me, and in researching that drawing, it sort of got me started on this very different track. I was hoping to share some slides, so let me try to get there. Okay.
And I should say, or I should have said, we will have Q&A, and if you put your questions in chat, when we start getting into questions, Simon will call on you to ask your question to Carmen directly. Oh, and if you have a comment as well. So you set to go, Carmen?
Yeah, that's great. I don't see anybody right now. I only see the PowerPoint. So the show, I started working on the show 8 years before it actually happened. And that, of course, was a great deal of time to absorb the research, but more importantly, to negotiate all the loans. There were 205 works from 50 international lenders. So it was a big challenge, but also a great joy. And so here you're seeing one of the first rooms in the exhibition. And yeah, this is going to be a trip down memory lane. I felt very strongly that because Michelangelo is an artist who defined himself first as a sculptor, that we really did need to have sculptures in the exhibition to tell the full story of Michelangelo, the disegnatore, so the divine draftsman and designer. And it was pretty hard to negotiate all those works, and especially the sculptures. It was going into Italy. We had at least 50 loans from Italy, and it was kind of like asking for the firstborn of the royal family. It was quite a challenge. And here, we at the Met, we have a terrific team of colleagues, and in the design department, the buildings, a lot of collaborators in just kind of filling out these galleries that are enormous. So here I'm with the team of the design department and the sort of project manager. And I think that any of you who are writers or artists, the fear of the blank page, the fear of the blank canvas, or the fear of this mammoth gallery that needs to be filled with works of art is pretty real. And I just wanted to show you some of the things that were, particularly surprises for me. Here is a shot of a fragment of a mural drawing that was in the house that belonged to Michelangelo. And of course, today is in a private collection, the Villa Michelangelo in Settignano. And I had been in Florence for 3 entire months, and I knew this work from a photograph. And I kind of had said, oh, I'm not going to really like it very much. Oh my God, I get emails with, I've just discovered another Michelangelo or another Leonardo, will you authenticate it? And so one of my friends and I, just sort of dragging me, got me there to the Villa Michelangelo. We rang the bell. And to make a very long story short, the owners became friends. But very importantly, this mural fragment, which is really, really rare. I mean, it is a piece of wall that was detached out of the second floor where the kitchen of Michelangelo's villa would have been. And this turned out to be a really important, very rare work by Michelangelo done in 1504, more or less, and where he was basically just kind of shooting the breeze on the wall, basically. So and so this was a mural fragment I was mentioning that turned out to be real. And even though I kind of waited 3 months being in Florence until going to see it, and it was really super exciting to actually get to work on this. And it's such a rare piece. I mean, it's basically an exercise drawing on the wall on the second floor where Michelangelo's family had the kitchen. So this was a piece of the wall that was detached and then mounted on masonite. So that's why it could travel. Could we have the next one? So here you can see that it's a pretty monumental work. And of course it suffered, there are a lot of losses, but it's a very powerful mural drawing. So this gives us a sense of the scale of his work. Can we have the next one, please? And, the process of selecting works is probably one of the more exciting parts of the exhibition. So that's kind of what I was choosing to talk about with you. Basically, the mandate was to go look at everything and anything by Michelangelo that was not bolted to a wall or bolted to the floor. And so it was going about, looking at all the works that had been attributed. And this particular sculpture, it was a pity that it really, in the end, was not exhibitable because it's a very important piece. It's a sculpture of San Giovanni, so this San Giovannino, so the boy Saint John the Baptist, and it was in a collection in Spain. And so during the Civil War in 1936, because it was in the house of nobles, the ducal family of the Medinaceli, the rebels burnt it. They decapitated it, and the sculpture was left in little fragments inside a coffer. And so by about 2015, the Opificio delle Pietre Dure in Florence started putting it together. And that's what I'm showing you, the parts that are sort of better in the reconstruction. But in the end, it seemed to me not only that the condition of the work was so compromised, but also for the public and really for me as an art historian, it was difficult to kind of be looking at mostly reconstruction of what are small original fragments. So with great pity, we had to put that aside. May I have the next one, please? And this one was a joy. So the library, the Biblioteca Bertoliana in Vicenza, is pretty much out of the way. Everybody who goes to visit Vicenza is looking at the Palladio villas and beautiful buildings. No one goes to the library. And I had seen some black and white photographs of this object published. It was discovered only in the late 1960s. And a lot of scholars had weighed in and said, oh, it cannot be real. It's by a workshop artist and all this. And literally no one had gone to see it. So here I'm showing you the photo of the actual surprise of opening the envelope and seeing this piece of paper unmounted. It looked like, like a scrap. So it's a letter that Michelangelo wrote to Pietro Urbano, one of his workshop assistants. But before, Michelangelo had drawn these studies of a bird. And in looking very closely at the drawing, one can really see the force of the hand of the artist pressing really hard on the chalk. And you can see the reinforcement lines and searching for the forms. And it's really very powerful drawing. And stylistically, it is very comparable to other drawings by him of this particular period. So it was really great to be able to bring something that was practically unknown even to the scholars in the field. So basically what it is, and you can see that the paper, Michelangelo used it to write a letter. So we're looking here at the outside of the letter, and you see the parts that are really dirty. Well, that's where the paper was folded. You can see towards the bottom the red wax seal. So it's really an amazing object. And so if we have the next slide, please. I think I put the other side. Yes. And so here is where Mickey was writing his letter to Pietro Urbano, who was in the quarries. And I mean, it's so intimate. And this again speaks to what I really wanted to convey to the public, or to, the general public, to the scholars, that there is really a person here, an artist. We can, with drawings by Michelangelo, we can really get into his mind. And here we have a piece of his private life. So it was just really exciting. And you can also see that his beautiful handwriting. So that was also another part that was really intimate and important to me. Can we have the next slide, please? And so one of the big coups for us was to get the very large full-scale drawing that you see on the end wall, which is a piece of a full-scale drawing for a fresco by Michelangelo. And it's like 3 feet tall. No, it's longer. And it's in Naples. And I remember starting the negotiation with the soprintendente there. And basically my whole attitude was I would have a PowerPoint ready, and I would sit down. These were people that I've known for a long time in my career. And so I would start laughing, and they would say, Mariella said immediately, I know, Carmen, you're about to ask something difficult. And so, I said, yes, let me show you the PowerPoint, and then let me discuss with you the works that we would like to have in the exhibition. And so this was pretty amazing. So you see it here in full presentation, but let's have the next slide. We are talking about a piece that weighs 600 pounds. We had two, basically those lifts on either side, a team of about 60 people. In this photo, we only have a few there, just trying to move this with all the care in the world to install it. May I have the next slide, please? And one of the really exciting things was trying to contextualize for a public what to do with the drawings for the Sistine ceiling. And to me, again, this was really important because it's about Michelangelo in the working process. So here on the left, our designers, who are absolutely brilliant, decided that one of the interesting, because I kept talking about my having spent so much time on the cleanings, the scaffolding for the restoration of the Sistine ceiling. And they said, well, why don't we build you a little scaffolding in the exhibition? And we also had this wonderful, huge scaled reproduction of the Sistine ceiling in order to be able to connect the drawings that related to the different parts of the Sistine ceiling. But this was really quite an expensive undertaking and difficult. May I have the next slide, please? So here we are building the Met Sistine ceiling in New Jersey. And it was, again, the technology just makes so much possible. And so here, what we did was have a photograph, very high resolution photographs, basically printed on canvas, because that was a way to get the texture and the right sort of a feel of the plaster surface. of frescoes. And then, of course, it was lit from above. And so that's why you got such great lighting. May I have the next slide, please? And so here we are on the last day of the exhibition with my Yale classmates, they were really fantastic in getting me through Mickey fatigue. And so Marina Sheriff, and there I am, Paul Caracone and Robert Johnson. It was just such a unique experience for me to be able to share this project and this artist that I have loved. I mean, basically, I started loving Michelangelo since I was like 15 years old. May I have the next slide, please? And so here we are with the other, my other baby. I started working on Leonardo and this Leonardo book 23 years until it was published in 2019, which was the anniversary year of Leonardo's death, 500 years. So it was a tremendous privilege to be able to finally have this big book come out. My publishers, my family, my friends, no one thought that it would ever see the light. So it was really something that, again, it was something very deep out of, I don't know, a spiritual place that basically just poured into those pages. And may I have the last slide, please? And at the same time, since we had the 500th anniversary of Leonardo's death, we celebrated it at the Met by having a loan of Leonardo's Saint Jerome from the Vatican, which is an incredible painting that's unfinished. And we set it up in a setting that was like a chapel. So pretty much like a funerary chapel, but very sober. And we got, of course, a lot of public. I think our general public and our scholarly public instantly got it, that what we were trying to transmit really was something very deep about the artist and this very, very special painting. But so that's my my PowerPoint.
So Carmen, what did you at the end of the exhibition, what did you come to know or think about Michelangelo that you didn't know when you started?
I think the fact that he was the sculptor draftsman really, really hit me very much, and how personal the act of drawing was for him, and how personal for him the fact that it is his hand drawing and also writing. It may sound really banal to say this, but there are other artists in this period, like say Raphael, and Raphael will be my next show in 2026. I mean, to finish off the triumvirate. With Raphael, for example, and he is an extraordinary genius. So I'm by no means trying to diminish this, but for Raphael, so often what was most important was the invention of the composition. So what he would have called the historia. And this is the reason that he had such a successful partnership with engravers, with printmakers, because they basically propagated his vocabulary, his inventions. Whereas in the case of Michelangelo, he absolutely hated prints and printmaking, because he felt that the hand of the artist was really what was the most important thing. So it was just seeing again an artistic personality in such a defined way, because it kind of stops being a case where you're comparing works of art. You're really comparing artistic personalities and, I mean, human beings. There is a sense of intimacy that's extraordinary.
Excellent. So, questions for Carmen? Margaret.
Yeah.
Hi, Carmen.
Hi.
My name is Margaret. I am a junior at Yale studying history of art.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I just have a question about the curation process. Like, what do you think is the most difficult for you when you're like assembling the whole exhibition together, I guess?
Well, it's a very sort of it's a yin and yang in a certain way. The negotiations of loans. As I said, really asking for, and in 2003, I did a very big exhibition also of Leonardo. It was called Leonardo da Vinci Master Draftsman, also at the Met. And with these sort of really important artists, basically you're asking, each work is a process itself. I can tell you that with most of Michelangelo, the loans to Michelangelo, especially because there were so many, and really the closer we are to today, it gets harder and harder to make these negotiations. I must have spent 10 times doing the negotiation of probably all the loans, and for some, I mean, I was in Italy, like, I don't know, every 6 weeks. So yeah, that is very, very intense. A lot of these loan negotiations also happen because there is a track record of scholarship, because, I mean, there have been many exhibitions of Michelangelo, as there have been many exhibitions of Leonardo. And so basically, you know, our colleagues in European institutions, in other American institutions, are pretty wary of having a request for yet another Michelangelo work. And so that's why the process of preparing very carefully for Italian loans is very difficult, because you have to go through many different layers. You go from the curators to the directors to the soprintendente of the particular city, then the soprintendente of the region. Then you have to go sit in the ministry, then give the Minister of Culture your presentation. And because there were 8 years in the preparation of Michelangelo, there were, you know, several generations and changes of jobs. Basically, 2 years before Michelangelo opened, all the directors were changed. and so, you know, there was a process of starting from scratch. And, you know, and then on the other side is just doing all the research and kind of knowing the pressure that it should not be just any kind of show. It's got to be really tightly argued with a great visual and intellectual rhythm, pacing, so that a real story comes across on the walls visually, but also intellectually and historically. And of course, in the loan negotiations, we promise that lots of new material and new research and new findings are going to be contributed. So yeah, it's a lot of things together, but it's very exciting. It's, you know, very sleepless nights. I probably aged 10 years. I put on a lot of weight, but you know, it was worth it.
Thank you so much.
Margaret, have you curated or been involved in curating a show?
I mean, it's my dream job to be a curator one day. I've only curated works from like Yale College students. I've put up like a little show in Silman before, but that's like the small thing. I mean, this is
Margaret, stay in touch and send me an email and we'll keep talking. I do a lot of this as well. I have been the Association of American Museum Curators has a mentorship program. So I'm pretty active in that. And I do a lot of mentoring among my colleagues, also students, my nephew and niece who just got into University of Pennsylvania. So for me, it's a real joy to have conversations and be as helpful as I possibly can. So please reach out.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course.
Awesome.
So Carmen, we have a question here in the chat from Ferdous Khan. who's asking, well, he remembers your impressive senior thesis.
Oh my
And he's
God.
asking whether, some of the inspiring ideas teachers in architecture were beneficial in your study of art history and in your professional life.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a great question for those. Thank you. It's funny because everybody in our entryway at Berkeley College was we were all in the same boat writing theses. And so I got so much support from my friends. We all helped each other. As far as architecture is concerned, actually, so the drawing that I was able to identify had been published upside down, and it was just a fragment and a total outline drawing, and it had been said to be an armpit. And I turned it around and I said, nonsense, this is a fragment of a head. And that fragment turned to be a full-scale drawing for the figure of Haman, for the face of the figure of Haman in the Sistine ceiling. And so I think that because in architecture, we are constantly aware of scale, and we are constantly aware of outline fragments and sort of thinking about designs in a more abstract fashion, it was possible for me to sort of intuitively, in a way, really, I have to admit that. And then I made the proposal. I published it as a short article, at least a reconstruction of the face in 1983. Then, so I spent about 2 years working on the research. I mean, I had no idea how you write an article, scholarly article. And the Sistine ceiling was being cleaned, and it took about 10 years to finish the cleaning of the Sistine. And so by 1990, they were finally at the point of the punishment of Haman, part in the fresco by the altar and the Sistine ceiling. And I had been invited to give a paper at a conference for the Sistine. I brought my full-scale transparency of the drawing, and with the restorers and the director of the restoration, they allowed me to climb on the scaffolding with my full-scale transparency. And we placed it on the actual fresco, and it was exact, one-to-one. And you have to remember that the floor to the ceiling is many, many meters high. I mean, I'm not really remembering how high, but it's like, I don't know, 25, 20, 30 feet high, something like that. So again, it was it was an intuitive, it's true, it was totally intuitive, but thinking about scale was something that when you see a fragment that is largish, it either is going to be full scale or is going to be a copy. And since I had already decided that this was an autograph drawing, the hunch was that it was going to be full scale. So it was just fantastic. That, I mean, I will never forget. And I'm really scared of heights, so climbing on that scaffolding was pretty tough.
All right, we have another question from Marina. Marina, would you like to ask your question?
Okay, go ahead.
It's actually Marina's husband. My favorite class in university was Michelangelo with Leo Steinberg, and he talked a lot about the debate between bona fide Michelangelo drawings versus copies by his apprentices of his, I think the word is disegni. So
yes.
And I was wondering, it's 40 years later, has that cooled down? Is there still a healthy debate? I figure you must be the world's expert on this.
Well, it's a wonderful question that you make. Leo and I were on completely opposite sides, I'll be honest. And I will say, I mean, he was a brilliant art historian, and I'm very beholden to his scholarship, but he was not a drawings specialist. And So the debate in the corpus of Michelangelo drawings has been very polarized. There are some scholars who believe there were 600 drawings by him that are autographed. And there is another scholar still alive today who believes there are less than 40 drawings that are autographed. I studied drawings from the original and for years and years and years, and many times over the same drawing. So I really do believe in an empirical approach, and it's also very archaeological. For me, understanding what I was mentioning about Michelangelo, the sculptor, who takes a piece of chalk or whether it's pen and ink and applies pressure and essentially often carves on the paper, is one of the great signs. If you study his drawings, so from photographs, which has been really the tendency among pretty much all scholars who are not museum people, photographs flatten all the archaeological elements and all the topography of how the chalk incisors the paper, and all that which is about the physicality of drawing, the speed of the hand on the paper, the way that chalk, splinters and all that. And there are many, many ways in which you can create groups of these works. So in short, my idea of Michelangelo's corpus is about 250 works. Now, Michelangelo was very jealous of his inventions and of his drawings, and he burned drawings. Now, we know from the biography by Vasari that Vasari tells us that at the end of his life, he burned all these drawings so that no one would see how much he had to basically sweat to have Minerva jump out of Jupiter's head fully formed, as he puts the metaphor. But in my research, I was also able to figure out that there were several campaigns in which he destroyed his drawings. And there were moments that are documented that we know there were people trying to fake his drawings. In about 1510, there are a lot of letters and documents that survive. And one of his friends talks about the fact that he witnessed a person going to the papal court and saying that he was showing a drawing by Michelangelo. And so the friend of Michelangelo, who is essentially a kind of colleague servant, says to Michelangelo, but I said it was non di tua mano, non era di sua mano. So this idea that things have to be by his hand, di sua mano, is very important. And that's all the evidence that disappears when one does not study his work from the original.
So Carmen, how is Leonardo different from Michelangelo as a draftsman?
Well, that's a wonderful question. So here we also get into the personal. Leonardo was a poster boy for a left-hander, so a natural left-hander, so mancino naturale, as he is often called. But let me also say that Michelangelo was also a left-hander, but he was reformed, and we know this from an autobiography that actually describes that Michelangelo was born left-handed and that he had to change his handwriting and writing with his right hand, drawing with his right hand, but he always carved and applied force with his left hand. So this is very interesting because that's also the direction in which we see the chisel marks on his sculptures. But so to get back to Leonardo, who was unreformed, all his parallel hatching goes in the opposite direction. So from lower right to upper left. And so you see all the parallel hatching in that direction. So in some sense, his drawings don't present a problem in attribution in the polarized way that we find with Michelangelo. But of course, there were lots of people around Leonardo and of course, forgers, modern ones as well, who imitate the left-handedness of Leonardo's drawings. So, and the way that you can tell them is that, again, you look at the speed, the force of the, and pressure of the hand on the paper. And so, and there is a kind of velocity in the way that Leonardo basically brainstorms. His sketches are so fresh on the page, so quick, so spontaneous. It's like, you know, letting the creative juices on the paper. So yeah, there are many sort of differences, but again, they tell us a lot about the person behind the work of art.
We have another question from Adam. Adam, would you like to pose a question?
Hello, first, thank you so much for sharing so many of your insights. I'm also an undergraduate who's interested in curation and studying art history. I wanted to ask you about the importance of layout and space and the surroundings in the curatorial process, because it doesn't seem as very frequent that curators are trying to recreate the experience of a chapel, or that they would go to the lengths of creating such a monumental recreation of the Sistine ceiling, for example. Yet it seems so sort of crucial to understanding these works. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about those sorts of elements in the curatorial process.
Sure. And Adam, again, I will say, please reach out to me, send me an email. I would love to continue having conversations with you about being a museum curator. I am very, very privileged and fortunate to work at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and where we have enormous resources. We have fantastically generous donors. And so I also get very involved in the fundraising process. An exhibition like Michelangelo is incredibly expensive. And so we really do count on the generosity of great donors. And of course, we have to actively participate in the fundraising. And I think this is really how big projects really happen, when a donor sees how passionate a person and the lengths that they might want to go. And of course, you know, I'm privileged to have an amazingly supportive director, an amazingly supportive president of the museum. So there's a huge team supporting these crazy ideas. I mean, they seem very crazy, 8 years in anticipation, but as you get closer and closer and everybody starts seeing the loans that are being promised and coming, there's a lot of momentum that gets built. So I really do believe that exhibitions, when they are thoughtful, visually and also articulated intellectually, that they advance the scholarship in the field of art history by leaps and bounds. Because even some of my Michelangelo specialists had not seen a number of the works that I brought together in the Met exhibition, just because they're in out of the way places. And I was very interested in, of course, having the greatest hits of Michelangelo's corpus, but I also was really interested in bringing out gems that have been forgotten or have not been valued very much. And when you know that there is their place in the sort of the larger project, some of these works, like that letter that I was showing, really shines, because basically that was on a pedestal, sort of opening up the entire room that was dedicated to the Medici Chapel at San Lorenzo, on the sculptures, of night, of day, of the tombs. So it was really important. And one of the biggest things I was really interested, and here the collaboration with the design department, the architectural designers in the Met was absolutely crucial. Michelangelo's art is about monumentality, and their monumentality of space. As an architect, Michelangelo believed that space itself was formed. And so for me, having galleries that were enormous, I mean, any of you who went through the exhibition, if you looked up to the ceiling, you saw that those spaces were absolutely enormous. And so I really wanted that the actual space of the exhibition, without, imitating columns, moldings, or whatever knickknacks you could, that it gives you a sense of the grandiose space and monumentality of Michelangelo's art. So it was about evoking with modern means something that was akin to what, in a deeper sense, his art is all about. We kept the walls, very plain, a lot of gray, like the pietra serena of his architecture, very little or almost no molding. I didn't want any of that. I wanted a really thoroughly modern installation, so that it was only and all about Michelangelo and his art.
Noah, you're next.
Hi, thank you so much. I also studied history of art at Yale, and now I'm doing a master's in Renaissance art at Syracuse. So I'll be going
Fantastic.
to Florence next year, and I'm very excited. The proximity to all the sculptures. But I'm curious I'm not sure what you might be able to share, but about the upcoming show on Raphael in terms of of course, there are a lot of drawings by Raphael, but it's much easier, I would imagine, to get painted work by him. So what is your approach going to be to that exhibition?
Oh, it's a great question. And let me say that we are 4 to 5 years away from that show. So panic hasn't set in yet about the loan negotiations. No, we will have a lot of support. We already have a lot of support. I, again, would like to do the exhibition so that we have a sense of Raphael, the person behind the artist, and to have a sense of his artistic identity. So my interest is to be able to bring a number of paintings into the exhibition. Now, having said that, remember that at this point, the majority of Raphael's paintings are either frescoes, so attached to the walls, unmovable, or they are on wood, on wood panels. And wood panels are exceedingly difficult to sort of get restorers to agree to lend them, because they're very fragile, especially to put them in an airplane. And this is going to be a pretty delicate situation, and it will be, a long conversations. The other thing that I'm very interested in, as I was mentioning before, Raphael was a tremendously fertile inventor of images, and of course also an amazingly beautiful draftsman. And so these are other aspects of his work as an artist that I am very interested in. I am, of course, very interested also in the portrayal of women. And of course, Raphael happens to have produced some of the most beautiful portrayals of women. And so this also will allow me to speak a great deal about women in central Italy and Tuscany, in the Lazio and Rome, in Urbino, etc. So there will be that component as well. For example, I mean, just to also give you a sense into some of the intellectual background for Michelangelo, I very much was keen on also showing the political aspect of Michelangelo as a personality in his time. He believed in the Republic. He left Florence, never to return, spent the last 30 years of his life in Rome. And so for me, it was really important to build a very tight nucleus of works that spoke to this aspect. So for instance, I had the bust of Brutus that Michelangelo carved. I had it also with a bust of Caligula that, of Commodus, that inspired Michelangelo. And I had also a bust of Julius Caesar that was carved by one of his superintendent sculptors for the Medici Chapel. So right there, you could speak about the assassination of Caesar Brutus. We could also speak about the metaphor that you remember that Duke Alessandro de' Medici is murdered. And so there is the coming back of the Medici, and of course, Michelangelo's sides against the Medici. So there was an extraordinary context, and of course, the Apollo David that had been conceived of as an Apollo, the sculpture, and then very rapidly turned into a David to take out all the political context, because the patron who commissioned that sculpture ended up beheaded by Cosimo de' Medici. So there were many stories and layers intertwined in the exhibition. And so works of art can really amplify many messages. So again, I'm very interested in building a very tight arguments and in the different rooms of the exhibition for them to have different arguments, but of course, an overarching sort of rhythm and thread to the entire exhibition as well. But we are pretty much at the beginning stages, but we will have prints. We'll certainly ask for the tapestries, and we'll see how many we can get. So yeah, it will be, we really hope that it will be as wonderful an experience as Michelangelo, but of course, no promises made.
I'm very excited.
Carmen, we're about to hit the hour. Are you okay if we run over a few minutes with some questions?
Yeah, it's fine. You can see that I'm enjoying talking and seeing all these wonderful friends and young people who would like to become curators. That really does my heart good.
Wonderful.
Simon, you have a question.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm really interested in, what it's like to sort of devote your life or, a greater part of your career to, to a handful of characters, of personalities, of artists, and to immerse yourself so deeply in their work. I mean, what does it do to you, and what sort of relation do you create over time to these personalities of times past?
Well, Simon, that's a really wonderful question. I'm not sure I can really answer it very eloquently. I mean, I would say that so much happens at the intuitive level and almost without realizing. At the Met, of course, my job entails an awful lot of very different things. So I'm a curator of Italian drawings and Spanish drawings, from the totally anonymous drawings to like the drawings by the great masters like Michelangelo's Libyan Sibyl and the beautiful drawings by Leonardo and Raphael that we have. And so, and for me, drawings speak in a very personal way. It always feels like we're having the glimpse over the genius's shoulder and sort of seeing ideas in the act of emerging. So there's something very intimate, very private. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, it kind of happened that I've spent that many years sort of studying and thinking about Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael. I adore Titian, but I don't think I will live long enough to do a Titian show. But art is long and life is short. And I think what is really very touching, it does feel like a privilege to be able to work so closely. And for me, these artists are really quite alive. And there is a sense of, it's not that I'm seeing ghosts or anything like that, but there is a sense of intimacy. As an art historian, I'm very involved also in paleography. So for me, reading Leonardo, right to left is very easy. And for my 4 volumes, for example, I retranscribed every cited text in my book. Of course, there is also an English translation, because one of the things that we've seen, and it also among my Italian colleagues, is that they tend to do what we call a critical transcription, say, of Leonardo's writings, and they polish all the orthography, they standardize his grammar, they introduce punctuation, and it kind of removes that level of intimacy. And because I study the drawings so closely from the original, I feel that the writings, and Leonardo produced 4,000 sheets of paper that still exist, and many, many manuscripts, that there is that same engagement with the original. I need to see his handwriting. And you can tell, for example, if there is somebody imitating his handwriting, and of course, fakes have crossed my desk. And you develop a sense of understanding the velocity with which he writes, the cursive really being very quick and very fluent. And this is very important. I've also come across plenty of Michelangelo forgeries. And in fact, when I was looking for letters to incorporate into the exhibition, the Michelangelo exhibition. And so, looking at all the letters that had been published or that I could go visit and see. And one of the not one of the major letters, but it's in a really important collection. And it had been cataloged by a really serious scholar as an autograph letter by Michelangelo. And I open it and I'm sort of looking at it and going, come on, you can't be serious. And it was clearly a 19th century fake. And one could tell because, you become so familiar with the fluency of Michelangelo's handwriting, and we can see it change every 10 years in his life. So it's something that's very present. And when you see somebody stumbling with the M and then does a totally uncharacteristic manner of signing off, or even putting the date, and the ink is really black rather than brown, and the paper looks like somebody suspiciously scuffed it. And it had even the little envelope with which the person had kind of put this piece of paper and given it to the very famous library in Italy as a gift and whatever. So yeah. So it's kind of fun. I take it as fun.
So kind of following on Simon's question, in terms of this, getting to know them, if you were able to ask Michelangelo and able to ask Leonardo a question, each one of them a different question, what would you ask them?
Oh my God. Well, Leonardo for sure. Why the heck didn't you finish all these paintings? One of the things I've been very involved in thinking about questions of the unfinished. And of course, Michelangelo also left a fair amount of work unfinished. And in the case of Leonardo, one of the things that started to really, and this was something that it gradually dawned on me after like all those 23 years of research and looking at the paintings closely. There is not a single painting by Leonardo that is absolutely finished. And even the Mona Lisa, if one looks it close and, holds it, I've been privileged to be able to hold the Mona Lisa during the times that the once a year examination, scientific examination. and you really get a sense of this painting as an object rather than this icon, behind, bulletproof glass. And you see that the middle ground of the picture, you can see down to the preparation of the panel, and that middle part of the landscape is pretty unfinished. The face of the Virgin and the Virgin and Child with Saint Anne, that is so glorious and beautiful painting. The face of the Virgin is practically unmodulated. And yeah, so, here we have this brilliant artist who was really easily distracted. I mean, what else can we say?
My favorite answer ever on an exam when I was a TA at Yale, for George Hersey's Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Raphael class was somebody wrote, Leonardo is a case of a man who thought too much for his own good.
And explored too much. Steph, I am so pleased that you mentioned George Hersey, because actually it was George Hersey who supported me when I made that proposal as a very young senior student, the discovery. And it takes quite a lot for a very famous professor like George Hersey to actually believe a kid who comes to his office and says, I think I found a fragment of a drawing by Michelangelo, and I think it relates to a figure in the Sistine ceiling. And it was really interesting because he, and then Creighton Gilbert, who became also my PhD advisor, also who is deceased, as is George. These are my great mentors who believed in me, who supported me. I mean, I didn't even know how to write a scholarly article, and George Hersey took me through, I don't know, we probably produced like 50 drafts of what was essentially a 5-page paper. They sent me to also speak to other professors. And I will tell you that a very famous professor at a very famous university art history program, I will not go and identify, when I went with all my materials with George Hersey's blessing and full support, and I showed this professor in this other university what I had found, he basically gave me 5 minutes and he said, I think it's an armpit anyway, in any case, and he kicked me out.
Yeah.
So it's really great to be able to have felt so validated. I mean, being an art historian is a tough thing, but I was so fortunate in having people who believed in me, because it is also a very tough field. And you can imagine that, there's also a lot of competition, but I've been very fortunate to have my core of friends, supporters, mentors that made everything possible.
So, okay, your Michelangelo question now. What would you ask Michelangelo?
What would I ask Michelangelo? I don't know, that he should have taken off his boots to sleep and had better hygiene. No, I do think that he would not have liked me, whereas I know that Leonardo would have liked me. So I think with all great, he led a very closed off life. There were no women really in his circle of friendships and in his family setting until Vittoria Colonna. He met Vittoria Colonna when Michelangelo was already 60 years old. And that was an amazing intellectual friendship. But Vittoria was a literary person. I am not a literary person, so I know where my shortcomings would have been. What a titanic artist. Really, he should have worked less. That's what I would have probably asked him.
Okay. Well, this has been absolutely wonderful. It's been a real treat. We really appreciate your sharing your time and your experience and expertise with us, and also offering to keep in touch with our young art historians. Because you're
I
right.
think it's great that we have, emerging scholars interested in pursuing museum professions. It is very exciting, I will say that.
So this is the point at which Simon and I invite you to return to our Thursday evening program and ask Kate if she could throw up the slide of the upcoming shows. We have, life and personal growth, and so we have, wait a minute, we have a TBD, wait a minute, emotional intelligence and resilience. And then we have, speaking of students, we've had one show in which the undergraduates have conveyed their experience of coping with the pandemic circumstances on campus. And the next show on the 14th will be with the graduate students. And then storytelling as a profession. This is the careers channel. In fact, I think ultimately, Carmen was talking about it. I think Carmen is such a wonderful art historian because she's such a great storyteller. She's telling us the stories of Michelangelo and Leonardo. But please stay tuned. Please come back, and we wish you all the rest of your great evening. And thanks, Kate, for helping us run this Careers Life in Yale program.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody here. Thank you. It's really heartwarming. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmen. Bye.
Bye.